The following program has been pre-recorded, so please don't call in at this time. If you wish to participate in the program, tune in at 5 p.m. every Wednesday for A Pause for Thought on Baton Rouge Community Radio. Good evening, fellow humans. This is Wayne Parker with A Pause for Thought on Baton Rouge Community Radio in Baton Rouge. This is the Baton Rouge Community Radio's only live call-in show so far, so yes, you can call in, and you are encouraged to do so and share your thoughts and questions with us. The only rule is that you state your point as an opinion or suggestion, and in a respectful manner. Anyone who tries to turn this into a rant show will be made to go away. As the title show implies, I want to create an environment where people can discuss issues that are important to them, our community, to our state, and the country as a whole. Tonight, we have two guests in the studio, and if you've heard the promos over the past week, our topic is a human embryo a human being? And if so, should it be treated the same as humans who are already born? And if you'd like to call in with your thoughts and comments, the number is 343-9927, 343-9927. And if you're outside the area code, live streaming on whyr.org, then dial the area code 225-343-9927. Okay, with me tonight are Alan Goff and Holly Galland. Got it right, good. Tell us about yourselves, Alan.
I am a native Baton Rougean. I grew up here, and I, in the late 70s, entered into the healthcare field, initially as a respiratory therapist, and then as a nurse, and then as a nurse practitioner. And spent most of my time as a nurse practitioner working with young people, mostly adolescents, some younger children. I volunteered a great deal for a while with the domestic violence programs, and came to this these issues around how I feel about children, about my respect for children and about their rights, and how they're taken care of.
Children, okay. So how does that bring you to this issue here of embryos?
Well,
do you think that human embryos are children?
I think they can become children. I think it's possible that they become children, but I am concerned about the children who are here and how well we do or do not take care of them. And that it seems that even with all of our discussions about these things, our children are not better off for all of the talk we have about how important children are and how important it is that all pregnancies come to birth, but we haven't done much in all these years about how well we take care of the children once they're here.
Okay, I don't want to get too much into the topic while we're still in introductions, but I appreciate that. Holly, how about you? What got you here?
Well, Alan, I'm really interested because that's really a great deal of my thinking, too. I'm a family doctor. I worked at the public hospital in Baton Rouge, Earl K. Long, for many years, over 20, seeing patients in a general practice, teaching family doctors, teaching nurse practitioners, teaching medical students. And I have a subspecialty in adolescent health care. And I've done family planning in all kinds of places like LSU and seen very distressed young women who'd been in circumstances that were unbearable. And I've done plenty of family planning at Earl K. Long and at the Planned Parenthood Clinic as a volunteer. But ultimately, to me, as a mother, I understand how difficult motherhood is, and And over the years of practicing family medicine, I have come to focus on children. And so now I work in children's mental health in schools.
But there are many who say that a human embryo is a child, and I guess that's where the rub is. It's actually, to me, from what little bit I've actually read about it, it is a very complex issue. In fact, I've got a couple of research papers here. One is from the Christian Apologetics and Research Ministry. Are you familiar with them?
No.
Okay. Well, they basically point out that there are different things besides humans, human physical attributes that go into making a human being. They say here that if a person was involved in an accident and lost both arms and legs, would he still be a human? Yes, of course. Let's say that he lost his genitalia. He is still a human by nature, though without the ability to reproduce. Therefore, it is clear that being a human is more than simply having arms, legs, genitalia, etc. And they go on to say that a person who is in a coma, who's not aware of anything, who can't communicate, and is totally dependent upon some other entity, exterior to itself or whatever, is still a human being. And then they say that therefore it is obvious that there is more to being human than physical qualities. There is an essence to being a human that, number one, cannot be covered by mere physical descriptions and functions, and two, is independent of certain physical and functional qualities. Humanness is innate, and this innateness must be included in the discussions of taking the life in the womb. And then, of course, they make the common argument, if we don't know when the life becomes human, why take a chance on killing it? How would you respond to things like that?
Well, but in the case of this person in a coma on life support, that is a person who has become human, developed a brain, lived a life, and also is not living inside someone else who is putting their body at risk to keep that human alive. I do not deny that that is a human, but people have argued for years, when does a conceptus become a person? And ultimately it comes down on your religious beliefs. And there are just some things that can't be scientifically ascertained. And this is one of them. Now, I think a lot of people agree one logical place to consider human or personhood would be at the time of quickening, when the fetus begins to move. Others wouldn't agree with that even. The Catholic Church in the mid-19th century decided that that was probably the time that a conceptus became a person. But it changed its mind. I think you really, in bringing up this whole subject, are really asking the wrong question. I think the right question to ask is, why don't you consider a woman a person? Is she just a vessel to offer full sustenance at her own risk to the care and growth of this human, potential human, which this person says is a potential human? Why is a woman not a fully conscious, moral human being able to make her own decisions about her ability to parent, her own health?
But doesn't society have a stake in determining what life should be preserved? I mean, we kill murderers. It's okay to kill in self-defense. There's certain things that society does that determines those things, when killing is legitimate, I suppose. And I guess that's at the crux of this whole situation here, is it not?
That would be one crux. Alan, you want to say
Okay.
anything?
Sure.
Well, I think, but the linguistics of it all. I mean, a woman could assert that she is defending herself if a pregnancy puts her life at risk, and not just her physical life. What if, I mean, there are many things that happen. Women might choose it because it makes things better for their other children if they just can't afford emotionally, financially. They don't have the wherewithal for one more child.
Okay, so the argument goes then: take the baby to term, give birth, and then give it up for adoption. It's simple. Problem solved, right?
Right.
Hardly.
Problem solved.
Hardly.
Well, why not? Why not? I mean,
Well, I tell you.
everybody wants to adopt a baby,
Well, I
right?
tell you, yeah, a perfectly healthy, certain race baby. It's still true. We have a lot of children in foster care who are adoption eligible, and those numbers haven't changed and gone down in all the 20, 30 years that we've been arguing about abortion. No, people aren't going to just adopt children. It doesn't happen. It hasn't happened. And one thing that I think is interesting too is the deal with in vitro. We probably have close to 1 million frozen embryos just in this country. And those parents get to decide if they are going to give those embryos, those extra embryos that they have, to someone else, or if they will be destroyed. Now, if we're going to start to call an embryo a person, that's going to change a lot of that.
Well, I think this, and I can't speak for them because I have never heard this point addressed before by the anti-choice side, but they would just say, well, we don't allow in vitro fertilization. We shouldn't even do that in the first place. That shouldn't even be done. It's a violation of God's great plan, things like that.
Well, but a lot of people who are anti-choice are in favor of in vitro.
Isn't that interesting? Yes. Well, and then again, I just brought in the fatal flaw, I guess, to the political argument against that sort of thing. And as Holly mentioned before, the will of God, that's religious. That's a religious argument, which I do not believe should come into play when making laws, because we all have our own set of beliefs. Whether or not we live by them, that's
Right.
another story, but another subject, actually.
Yeah.
Holly, before you mentioned women in distress that you've dealt with.
Yes.
Have you dealt with women in distress regarding pregnancies? Is that what you were getting
Oh, I was actually thinking of a young woman I saw years ago at LSU who had the date rape drug. Something dropped into her drink at a bar, woke up the next morning in a strange bed. I think she was a junior at LSU, and from this encounter, she became pregnant. She was working her way through college. She did not feel that she wished to bring this pregnancy to term.
That would have had a profound impact. Well, either way, it would have had a profound impact on her life. Surely it would have wrecked her plans for the future as far as an education and career, or it would have severely hampered them.
It would have hampered them. A lot of women give birth and finish their education and do their best, but people need to take motherhood seriously.
Right.
It is a very difficult task, and I think that is one major reason that I am very pro having your options open, either to have a child or not to have a child.
But if you don't want to have a child, don't have sex, Holly. That's well, that is in fact one of the arguments that are made.
I know.
All,
I
yeah.
know.
all you need to do is
not have
aspirin,
sex.
keep an aspirin held between your knees, and
Right,
right.
right.
And-
I want to remind the listeners you can call in and share your thoughts and comments. I'd prefer to hear from someone who has an opposing view. You're listening to A Pause for Thought. Our topic is a human embryo a human being? And if so, should it be treated the same as humans who are already born. The number here is 343-9927. 343-9927. Dial the area code 225 if you're outside the calling area. Okay. We ended on a little bit of a joke there when I mentioned, and actually it's not a joke because some people do say, if you don't want a baby, don't have sex.
Right.
Yeah. Which I think, too, is one of the underlying real issues here is women's sexuality. And that women, need to behave differently about their sexuality. You're not supposed to have sex unless you are having sex to reproduce.
There has always been that, I don't want to call it a paradox, hypocrisy.
Mm-hmm.
Because, even me, when I was in high school and I was first discovering the joys of sex, I liked to do it. And I like girls who like to do it, but there was a stigma attached to them, and, I'd never marry a girl like that because, that kind of thing, And, of course, as I got older, I thought I wouldn't want to marry a woman who'd never had sex before either. But but I digress. Anyhow.
Oh, do.
Sometime at a party, maybe, Holly. But
May I
jump
say
in.
something? Yeah,
Of course.
I'd like to take this opportunity to talk about one of the most articulate human beings on this subject, a gentleman named Dr. Willie Parker. And Willie Parker is an African-American OBGYN, the second youngest son of a single mother who raised 6 kids on her own in northern Mississippi. He is an astonishing person, went to Harvard, went on to become an OBGYN, and he did not do abortions, but now he does. And when asked why, he said, I do abortions because I'm Christian. I thought this would be interesting.
Yes, it's interesting to me.
Yeah. He said he had a come to Jesus moment. He kept seeing women. I mentioned one woman in great distress that I saw. I've seen many more, and I know Alan has. But he saw so many women in great distress in his practice. So I'm going to read. He said, one day he was listening to a sermon by Dr. Martin Luther King on the theme of what made the Good Samaritan good. A member of his own community passed the injured traveler by, King said, because they asked, what would happen to me if I stopped to help this guy? The Good Samaritan was good because he reversed the question. What would happen to this guy if I didn't stop to help him? So Parker looked into his soul and said, what happens to these women when abortion is not available? So if you press this embryo issue, that's the ultimate goal of the embryo issue, and I can give you a history of that too, but I think we really need to understand people like Dr. Parker and where he's coming from, and Alan and I, who've seen women in distress.
You've seen the complexity of the issue because you've actually been hands-on in dealing with it face-to-face.
Absolutely.
As had Dr. Parker, whereas I suspect a lot of these people who are beating their chests, it's always easy to think you know everything when you know very little, and I learned that from personal experience. We were discussing that before the show. I finally realized I was nowhere near as smart as I thought I was, and life suddenly became easier for me. But I wanted to go to offer another direction there, but that is also a good point there. There's someone right there who is a Christian, and he came to Jesus. Jesus was very compassionate too toward the people.
Absolutely.
And I don't think there's anything in the Bible that says he did anything to save the life of a zygote or anything like that.
No.
So, but here's something I want to throw at you here. This is from the Westchester Institute. Are you familiar with them?
Nope.
Okay. I didn't print out their cover page because I pay for my stuff, but what they said was the important. This is the white paper, or these are excerpts from a white paper that I read of theirs, and they said that the purpose of that white paper was to give a scientific definition of when human life begins. Okay? And I had to say that in reading their definition, it was compelling. Okay? But towards the end, they make the statement that once a concession has been made, and I'm quoting here, to the concept of okay, concept of manufacture and so an arbitrary point at which development has proceeded far enough along the assembly line to generate a human being. Okay, so yeah, once the human embryo has developed enough to where the precise positioning of the point where humanity becomes is purely a matter of preference, convenience, and the power to enforce one's view. So basically, they make the whole argument that it starts as a zygote, then they say that it starts at the next phase, but they're saying that humanity can be judged to occur during any part of that spectrum up to and including birth, and is just for purely preference, convenience, or the power to enforce one's view that we do it. And I thought to myself, I would suspect that they would too.
They being?
The people who are anti-choice. For example, okay, everyone I've asked, every anti-choice individual that I've asked of this question, I said, what if the fire department is called to a burning building and it's a reproductive health clinic or whatever, women's clinic, and they're informed that there's a freezer full of human embryos in there? Mm-hmm. Are these people going to expect these firefighters to go in there and risk their lives to pull that freezer out and hook it up to a generator? And what if there are, say, 200 embryos in this freezer, and while inside the building the firefighters discover that there's a young secretary trapped under her desk screaming for help? Would these people say, well, the firefighter should choose the young woman and drag her out, or choose the maximum amount of human life to save by pulling out the freezer? I don't think so.
Right.
And I really don't believe that. And I'd love to hear somebody call in and claim that they do. You can call in at 343-9927, 343-9927. But they're right there. It shows that even they, with their theology or their ideological beliefs, still have a point at which they are willing to allow the end of a life. If a young woman of childbearing age is mortally injured, but it's determined that they can be kept alive indefinitely on life support, should we keep them alive long enough to determine if they contain a human embryo, a fertilized egg? And if we do discover that they have one, should we keep them alive until the baby is brought to term? And who pays for this? Who does this? I just don't think they have thought this all the way through to the logical end. But this paper here that simply states it's a matter of convenience or practicality or the ability to enforce one's view is true for both sides, in my opinion.
It is. And for me, that's why allowing people, having some respect for people, to allow them to make those choices for themselves, because we don't know exactly what their circumstances are. And if someone knows that they don't have the wherewithal to raise a child, to be a good parent, to give a good life to this child, and many people, you're also asking a woman to kind of carry a baby for 9 months so that someone else can have it.
Yes. Oh, but they don't want it anyway.
But being pregnant and carrying a baby for 9 months means you're taking care of that pregnancy the entire time. And we start to make laws and rules about what women can and can't do when they're pregnant, because it might put their fetus at risk.
Right. Oh, I believe someone was prosecuted for murder, or charged at least, for murdering 2 human beings when he killed a pregnant woman.
Well, there's also the whole issue of women being prosecuted because they used drugs during a pregnancy.
That's true too.
And that issue you talk about with a person who's been in a terrible accident, and should they maintain the pregnancy, that's a whole nother issue. And there's a lot of there was this case somewhere in the Southeast, and if you want to talk about that, we'll come back. But I object to this person's logic because he uses certain words like convenience. This is not an issue of convenience. This is an issue of that own person's ability to think morally and ethically and practically about themselves. People don't have abortions for convenience.
You mean it's not just used as a simple method of birth control? Oh, I can go have all the sex I want to. I can just abort the fetus. That's one of the arguments that's promoted.
I know. That's why I brought it up.
And I don't know many women who have told me that they've had abortions, but the few that I have all felt profound guilt for a long time, or a mixture of emotions. They just never really felt for sure, And if you think about it, to me, aborting a fetus is sure it's an interruption, a willful interruption of the divine process, which is nature, to me.
Yeah.
And so that's got to be hard for anybody to do.
Well, women who go through miscarriages go through the same agonizing
things, yes.
stuff about it. Did they do something wrong? Did they cause it? And the real loss is that hope of what could be, because it is about what may be.
Yes.
Because there are many, 25% of pregnancies end in miscarriages by 6 weeks.
Huh.
We don't have funerals, usually, for those early ones like that. We don't give Social Security numbers to those
That's another point, yeah.
fetuses or embryos. So we don't treat that as if it's a person. We never have.
No.
And we
No.
still don't.
And nobody does, okay?
Right.
So, yeah, and then there again comes back to the argument that this white paper made, was that it is a matter of practicality or convenience, for lack of a better word, okay?
That's a loaded word.
Mm-hmm.
But it's
a judgmental word.
Well, okay.
That's it.
But it's a judgment call, okay, for the individual. And, of course, society has made judgment calls as well, in the fact that we don't have funerals for miscarried babies, miscarried human beings, right? Of course,
Miscarriages.
okay.
Which in medicine is an aborted fetus.
Yeah.
That's the medical
Yeah, it's
language.
either,
We still use the word abortion for miscarriages in medicine.
right.
I would like to bring up, because we're running out of time,
Yes, we have a couple of
something, a
minutes.
really important point, and I would love it if you'd have a show about this. There's a concept, we've talked for years about pro-choice, but in the mid-'90s, a wonderful group of African-American women got together, Sister Song, and said, that is the wrong language, and that the real language is more how Alan began this. And I will say the 4 tenets of what they developed is called reproductive justice. Because choice means you've got the means, you've got the money, you've got the time, you've got the babysitter, you can drive wherever you need to, and so forth. But in reproductive justice, Sister Song very beautifully articulated the right to have children. People have the right to not have children. People have the right to raise their children in a safe and healthy environment, which is what Alan was talking about at the very beginning. And also that people have the right to health and self-determination regarding their bodies and sexuality, free from oppression and shame. And the shame is what you were just talking about. And I think this is where we really need to take our discussion, because it is whole. It includes all the issues that a woman will take into her thought process before making any decision about a fetus.
I can certainly go along with that, and we have a call coming in. Unfortunately, as often occurs, we don't have time to take it.
Oh.
But very, very interesting thoughts, and do me a favor and write that down and remind me of that, and I'd be glad to have you back in the show, because I want to discuss issues like this and share them with our listeners and have them call in and share their thoughts as well. You've been listening to Alan Goff and Holly Galland speaking about human embryos and whether or not they're human beings. And this is Wayne Parker with a pause for thought. coming to you on Baton Rouge Community Radio, 96.9 FM in Baton Rouge. I thank you for listening, and we'll come back next week and we'll discuss the pros and cons of society and solitude.